Hello friends. Welcome to the Eastern Front channel. Today we will talk with you about the memoirs of Friedrich Paulus adjutant, Arno von Lenski, who fought with Paulus until he was captured in 1943. A bunker in the steppe. Apart from this sad episode in the military bureaucracy, I was pleased to be back with Paulus again. He had greeted me especially heartily. Already my first critical view had shown me how much the catastrophic situation of his army was consuming him. The nervous sucking in of his face seemed no longer to be heard, head and shoulders were more strongly bent forwards than before. There was bitter disappointment in his words, he was unhappy with himself and his dealings. Tired and stressed from his just-ended journey to the hard-pressed western front of the cauldron, he asked me where I was accommodated. When I told him that I had had nothing from the Chief of Staff as yet, he told me to go and look around and to come back at 4 p.m. He hinted that I would have a lot to do in the days to come. Neither recommendations for awards nor promotions had been worked on during the past 3 weeks. That is why he had asked for me. I went back into the open. A few dugouts lay half underground on the open steppe. No tree, no bush to provide cover, all vehicles had to park several hundred meters away. Lieutenant Zimmermann told me that this had previously been the headquarters of the 295th Infantry Division. Roundabout were similar clusters of bunkers, all interconnected by tracks and footpaths. Would I find my way around in this labyrinth? Next I had to go to Major General Schmidt, whose bunker lay close to that of the Commander-in-Chief. May I ask where my section is accommodated, General? There is no room for you here, your clerks are in a bunker about 1,000 meters away. Lieutenant Schatz will take you there. Together with Schmidt's orderly officer, I trudged across the steppe for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Finally we stood before a hole in the ground. My eyes gradually picked out the outlines of Staff Sergeant Cupper and Senior Corporal Dr. Ash. Both were delighted to see me again. I brushed the tears from my eyes and a dry cough from my chest. I could hardly breathe and had to go out into the open with both of them. It is impossible for you to live here, Colonel, we have hardly any room in this 3-meter square hole. We can't even put a typewriter on the little table, one cannot talk of doing proper work here. We have to open the door to be able to see, but then the cold makes our fingers clammy and immobile. No, I countered, we will get things going somehow. The smoke had dispersed a little so that I could see the accommodation a little better. 2 wooden stretchers on which blankets lay had been fixed one above the other along the long wall. There was no room for another bed, the floor of firmly stamped earth was frozen. As I lit a cigarette, ice crystals in the walls glittered in the shine of the burning match. No, 3 men could not really be accommodated in this hole, we needed some other accommodation. That Schmidt saw too when I reported to him. I myself was provisionally given space in General Paulus's bunker, and a small room was provided for my staff in the big headquarters. Already next morning work started on a new earthen hut. Meanwhile it was 4 p.m., the appointed time for me to go to General Paulus. Although in the last 2 or 3 days I had heard something from General von Gablenz and Colonel Bader about conditions in the cauldron, I was now concerned with a fully open question. Next in turn came Paulus with questions. He was mainly interested in conditions outside the cauldron. How goes it then on the lower Chur and north of Morisovsk? What was your battle group's task, Adam? I reported fully on the development from the November 22nd to the December 10th, finishing with the following hint. The army group expected me to hold the bridgehead over the Don east of Verkhncherskaya, under all circumstances in order to ease the way of the 6th Army to the west or southwest. Soldiers and officers of the battle group were very disappointed when they discovered the army was digging in, and making no effort to break out of the encirclement. I too expected daily that the army would break out to the southwest. During the last days the soldiers often asked me, why did the stream of blood have to flow, if the army was not to break out? As I was finishing my report, the first General Staff Officer entered. Colonel Elchlep shook my hand firmly, lucky that you should be here at last. I have been carrying out the most urgent of your tasks for the past 3 weeks, it went, however, more badly than correctly. Paulus interrupted him, Adam, I owe you yet another answer. The best thing for me to do is to describe to you the whole debacle since the November 22nd, so that you understand things better. After several seconds of reflection, Paulus spoke again, that I had already ordered the withdrawal of the army behind the Don on the November 21st. You already know. Shortly after my flight into the cauldron, I summoned the commanding generals together to a meeting. In full agreement with them, I repeated our conclusions on the November 22nd and several times in subsequent days to the Army High Command. The orders for the breakout were to be issued early on the November 24th, there was nothing else to do. But in a conference with Hitler, Göring said that he was in a position to supply the 6th Army by air. Consequently, the Führer decided to turn down my request. Despite the orders for the breakout, I received this radio message. The Commander-in-Chief handed me a sheet of paper. Attentively, I read the following text: the 6th Army is completely encircled by Russian forces. The Army can be assured that I will take all appropriate measures to care for and timely replace it. I know the brave 6th Army and its Commander-in-Chief, and know that they will do their duty. Adolf Hitler. I returned the paper without a word. You see, Adam, I could not handle things differently. Since the arrival of that message, I have called back all the commanding generals, including also those of the 11th Corps and the 14th Panzer Corps, which meanwhile had carried out the change of banks on the Don and with part of their units had taken up the new Western Front. All expressed more or less concern about the possibility of air supply. The last ends all my proposals under the prevailing conditions of making a breakout from the pincers. Only one man energetically expressed another opinion, General von Seydlitz. I understand that Hitler's order weighs heavily, General. But I know that Colonel Bader as well as other senior Luftwaffe officers are of the opinion that it is impossible to supply an army of about 330,000 men by air. Seydlitz has demanded that we act contrary to the Führer order. I have no suggestion to make about this. Seydlitz himself has given a clear example of what happens when commanders manage things their own way. Without our knowledge, he took the 94th Infantry Division back from the northeastern corner of the cauldron. The enemy recognized the move and immediately attacked. The division was completely wiped out, and we were forced to disband it. I let the divisional staff be flown out. Our handling can only be successful when it is in harmony with the intentions of the High Command. The telephone rang, since the December 12th connection with Army Group Dawn had been by the decimeter apparatus. Manstein was on the line. Paulus waved us out. There was no longer an opportunity to learn more about the tragic fate of the 94th Infantry Division. Months later in captivity, General von Seydlitz told me that in giving the order for the division to retreat he had firmly believed he was acting in accordance with the Army Command's proposed breakout. That Paulus 2 or 3 days later submitted to Hitler's order was not Seydlitz's fault. In fact, he could not have held on for much longer on the strongly endangered northeastern front to the Volga, with the widespread and very weak 94th Infantry Division. In the operation ordered by Seydlitz, the defense sector would have been reduced to 15 kilometers. Paulus, as a well-educated officer of the General Staff, assessed the situation soberly. He was thoroughly aware of the deadly danger. But going against a given order went against his military upbringing. So with Paulus, as with many older officers, from the very beginning their responsibility for the soldiers and military obedience were in strong conflict. After some difficult inner conflict, military obedience won. I accompanied Colonel Elchlep to his quarters, where we continued our discussion. Do you know, Adam, our senior quartermaster has behaved completely correctly? Lieutenant Colonel von Konowski, whom Bader has now replaced in the cauldron, was worried from the start. On not one single day have the minimal essential number of tons of supplies been flown in. Hunger is increasing. If the liberating offensive from outside fails to break through, things look very black. Would it not be right to get out of this damned mess against Hitler's orders and break out? No, we know neither the intent nor the possibilities of the High Command. Schmidt and I have strengthened Paulus in his final decision. You would have behaved exactly the same if you had come here. What should I say to that? It was particularly difficult for me to put myself in the situation with which the Commander-in-Chief was confronted. For I knew for certain how carefully General Paulus considered things. Elchlep went on. The conversation with the commanding generals finally broke up dramatically. All turned sharply against Seydlitz. Colonel General Heitz threatened to shoot him if he continued to demand disobedience of Hitler. Seydlitz then laid a memorandum before Paulus, the original of which was sent on to Army Group B. Should you visit the Corps in the next few days, which is not far from here, you can familiarize yourself with this memorandum. Seydlitz has, with the opening of the Demayansk cauldron last year, amassed various experiences that he brought to our attention. What he writes is not uninteresting. I too burned, despite or because of the inner unrest that gripped me after this account, so I went quickly to my section. Cupper had already prepared something. I wanted an overview of the personnel strengths of the divisions and army troops as quickly as possible. That was not at all easy. Many units had been torn apart. There, the remains of a battalion had been extracted to block gaps in the western and eastern fronts. Here, alarm units had been set up and thrown into battle. Often an officer did not know his unit's soldiers. The soldiers frequently did not know their officers or even the name of the man next to him. Losses in killed and wounded were reported only in numbers, not by name. Usually only the names of senior officer casualties were given. Under these circumstances, it was very difficult to obtain realistic results. This was only a small part of Arno von Lenski's memories. I am waiting for your discussions in the comments. Also, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. See you all soon for now.